Hi, everybody. My name is Dorothea von Moltke. I'm one of the owners of Labyrinth Books, and I welcome all of you to the first event of our fall event series. It's a really special occasion to be back in this space, a virtual space, with all of you. We'll be doing a combination, actually, of in-person events at the store, which have also then a streaming option for anyone who's more comfortable joining from home. And then also online only events like this one that allow us, as they have these past many months, to hear from authors and speakers who are elsewhere, and also to reach audiences, of course, who live elsewhere. We're hoping in this way to continue to create forums for debate, discussion, exchange of ideas that are both mindful of health precautions, but still lively. And most of all, we hope in this way to connect with all of you. And I encourage you, if there's something in our lineup that you'd like to come back to our store for, we'd love to see you there. In-store events will require proof of vaccination and a mask, and the chairs will be well distanced. So we will try to take care of everyone, and but know that you have other options. And you can find our lineup under our events tab at labyrinthbooks.com. if you want to browse that. I'm so pleased, though, that we're opening our season with tonight's conversation, a conversation between two exceptional novelists who share a gift, I think, of writing unflinching fiction, fiction that helps us to see clearly and to understand better the political forces, the social, often the religious forces that shape our troubled world. And they are, of course, here to talk about the translation, which is just out, of Alaa Al Aswany's most recent book, The Republic of False Truths. And because we're not in the store, but I want you to see it, here it is. And I will be introducing them both and then bringing them up very soon onto the screen. Just a couple housekeeping notes from me before we do that. First of all, my thanks go to Emily Reardon at Knopf, and I saw her in the audience, so hi. And then also to our co-sponsors tonight, the Institute for Transregional Studies at Princeton University. And I would like to now also take a second to point out two important buttons on your screen. The first is the Ask a Question button. It's at the bottom middle of your screen. You can see it there. There's a little one there already with a question already in the queue. So we will leave time for your questions at the end, and I encourage you to just put those in the queue as they occur to you. Better there than in the chat. It sort of makes it easier to call, to see them there. Above that Ask a Question button is another green long button, and that's where you go to order a copy of The Republic of False Truths from Labyrinth and get 10% off. You just need to enter Aswany at checkout as a discount code. If you prefer to come to the store to get your copy, that's great. You can also call us or email us, and I've put the information for all of that at the top of the chat. So over the summer, I looked back over 25 years of events programming at Labyrinth, and I was ashamed to take stock of the fact that we have only far too rarely featured fiction from other parts of the world. And so I'm especially glad and honored to welcome Alaa Al Aswany tonight. He is one of the most prominent writers writing in Arabic today, and is probably best known for a book from the early 2000s called The Yacoubian Building, which was a best-selling novel in the Arab world for several years running and has been translated, I think I saw, into 37 languages. His many other books include, most recently, The Automobile Club of Egypt, and his honors are too many to list, but I'll just mention that in 2016 he was appointed a Chevalier of the Ordre des Arts et des Lettres of France. And here to interview Alaa is Omar El Akkad, himself an acclaimed novelist. In fact, the BBC named his book, American War, one of just 100 that have shaped our world in that selection. And when you enter the sort of prescient dystopian world of that book, you do wonder if fiction follows fact or facts sometimes follow fiction. It's a remarkable book, and I want to take a second now because Omar's new novel is What Strange Paradise, and Omar will be a guest at our own Princeton Public Library's Beyond Words series just a few weeks from now. And I encourage you to find the link that I've put at the top of the chat. So if you scroll back up there, you'll see a link. And if you click on there, you can register and tune in. I think it's November 12th to hear Omar speak about his own work. Tonight is dedicated to a conversation about Alaa's work. I should say that both Alaa and Omar, in addition to their novelistic work, are prolific journalists. Alaa really is a public intellectual, admired for his courage in challenging the powers that be, in holding up a mirror to their hypocrisies, their manipulations, their varied cruelties. And he does all of this also in The Republic of False Truth, which it was published in 2018 in Arabic, and as many of you might know, it remains banned in Egypt and elsewhere. I'm going to now step aside, but want to first say just one more thing, which is that books like this one that deal with hard truths are, of course, often demanding to read. And I can tell you from conversations that I have every day in the bookstore that readers ask for hope to win out in such books. For me, Antonio Gramsci is important when I think about all this. He insists that what is required of us is a pessimism of the intellect and an optimism of the will. My mind, he wrote from prison, is pessimistic, but my will is optimistic. And that remains a personal truth for me. So then in reading Alaa's new book, I again and gratefully encountered the fact that there is no hard opposition between those two. And so with that note of thank you for this book, for this work, I want to invite Alaa Al Aswany up on the screen here with a click of the button. There we go. Welcome, Alaa.
Thank you very much for
It's so good to
everything.
have you.
Thank you very much.
And now comes Omar. And I will hand things over to the two of you and join you again for the Q&A. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. My name's Omar. I'm a writer. I'm based in Portland, Oregon, originally from Egypt. It is my honor and privilege to be here with a writer who I don't think you can say this about most writers, whose work not only has been hugely popular, but has influenced the cultural landscape of a country and a region. I think that is a very rare thing. It is my privilege to be here with Dr. Alaa Al Aswany. Doctor, I want to start by asking you about the book, first off, before I venture into every other facet of your incredible career. This is a book to me that is about all the many different Egypts that are within Egypt, all the many different lives that live parallel to one another in this country. And one of the things that struck me when I was reading it is how intense a personal reaction I had to some of these characters, because they were people I knew. They were distant family members. They're people, I remember having these kinds of arguments. And I'm wondering, when you're constructing a novel where you have parallel character streams, you have multiple characters and intersecting storylines, what is your starting point, and how do you keep it from sort of collapsing in on itself when you have all these different characters and all these different lives intersecting?
Well, thank you, Omar, for this wonderful introduction. And, literature is an organic thing. It means that literature belongs to life. You probably know I'm a dentist too. So we had a medical education, and we learn what is organic and inorganic. So what is organic belongs to life, and what belongs to life, uh, there is always an element, decisive element, which is not definable. You see, so what I will explain now is everything I can figure out, but it's not everything. You see, I feel the novel. You know, Isabel Allende said once, quote, "We do not invent the novel, we discover the novel." And this is very profound and very true. You have the novel on you, in your heart, and your job is to know how to get it out. So the motive for a novel to me is not an idea, is a feeling. I have the files, projects for novels for more than 15 years, but it hasn't clicked yet. At some point, it will click. I will feel it. And then after that, the novel research, of course, you must make a novel research about the topic, the characters, and everything. And then the characters, and this is the most decisive part, to be capable to create real characters. Characters that at some point you will believe that they do exist. Of course, they are invisible, but they do. I know them, I feel them. And then you take those characters and you begin the writing. And then after 2 or 3 chapters, you will lose control on your characters. Your characters will become independent and they will decide for themselves. And every morning, because I write in the morning, every morning, early morning, I do not invent the scene. I describe the scene that I see on the screen of my imagination. At this point, some characters are wise characters, good people, they do always the good things. And some characters are idiots, stupid people, they do bad things. I cannot change what they have decided. You see? And here, when somebody will tell you, and this happened to me, I'm quite sure you as a novelist will happen to you, is that some readers with good intention would he would ask you, why did you kill this guy in the end? I didn't kill anybody. You know, there was somebody who killed him, and I felt very sorry for him. But I just couldn't help it. I couldn't control anymore my characters. And this is briefly how I write, but I tell you, this is not everything. Something is very important, but it's not definable.
Actually, before we go any further, I should let the audience know I have more than enough questions to take us through the whole hour. But if you want to ask your questions, there's a little button at the bottom. I think it says ask a question. Feel free to drop it in there and we will get to it towards the end of the hour. But I want to get back to the novel. One of the things that really stuck with me about these characters is the sort of duality of a person who is capable of showing extreme tenderness to his children and acting in a very sort of overtly pious way, and also overseeing horrific torture, in the middle of the day. And the extent to which they are able to keep both of these versions of themselves coexisting without any issues of conscience, without tearing themselves apart. And I think this is one of those things that really stuck with me about the people I remember from living in Egypt, is that the talent for being able to hold these two versions of yourself. I'm curious, the novel takes place in the aftermath of a failed revolution. There is that sense of the sort of the heartbreak of that. When you are writing these people, are you one of those writers who's pulling from individual people in your life? Is it an amalgam? And has that process for you changed as a writer post-Arab Spring and over the last 10 years, over this period of Egypt having almost changed and then gone back to something we all sort of remember?
Well, the formula is fiction equal reality plus imagination. So everything I have written is taken from something real, but I work, with my imagination to get the product, the literary character. Rarely, very rare, you could find in life a character, a person who is a literary character in the same time, and you could write this guy or this lady without change. And this is, of course, for any novelist, is a present. When you find somebody and you just follow him or follow her and write down. But usually you must work, and sometimes you gather 2 or 3 persons, to make one character with your imagination. This is how I write. I of course, there was an assumption in some studies of psychology is that, and they were talking about the novelists mainly. They said the artist, but the novelist they focused on the novelist. They said that the novelist is not one single person. The novelist is 2 persons. One of them is the individual, the one to whom you're talking, the one who's taking the subway. This is the individual. And there is the novelist. And this novelist is hiding behind the individual with a very effective and sensitive camera. Accordingly, anything the individual will see, the novelist will keep the photo of this thing. Accordingly, when you set to write, you use your archive, of course. So I left the Egyptian revolution, I would say, even before the revolution, even years before the revolution. And I knew it was coming. And I have interviews in the West saying that there will be a big thing, a big change in Egypt. So I did expect the revolution to happen because I was very much in contact with the daily life. So I was able to feel it. And I lived the revolution, and I knew during the revolution that I will write about the revolution. But here is the thing. There is a big difference between journalism and fiction writing. In journalism, there is what we call in French, actualité, what is actual. You can write an article, a piece about a manifestation while you are in the manifestation. In fiction, it's different. You need a space, you need a distance so that you see everything clearly. So I had to wait for 4 or 5 years after the revolution to be able to write about the revolution. But what is very important in any fiction, not only in my novels, is not the political element or what we call the now element. The now element is not really. You are not obliged to read a book, 600-page novel, to understand that Sisi is a terrible dictator. You know that, and if you don't know that, in 10 minutes online, you will see everything. What is more important, the most important thing in fiction is the human element, is to be able to create characters, and those characters will live forever. We read now Dostoevsky, we read Chekhov, Balzac, Hemingway. Those writers are, were describing societies that do not exist anymore. I mean, the political problem in the 19th century, Russia doesn't exist anymore. But you will see real people, convincing, vivid characters, and you will read a novel that was written 160 years ago, and you will say, this guy is exactly like my neighbor or my cousin. So this what counts, what is important in literature is the human element.
I think I'm not sure that all of the audience might be aware of what kind of a price you paid for writing this book. And so I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about what happened in the aftermath of this book's publication in Arabic, and what that has meant for you personally and your ability to maintain a relationship with Egypt.
When I was first writing, my literary success was not easy. You know, I was not allowed to publish my books in Egypt for 10 years. I was refused to be published by the Ministry of Culture 3 times: 1990, 1994, 1998. 1998, the refusal was unfortunately, by a novelist, and he was in charge. He was impolite. He refused to publish my book in impolite way. And I decided to quit writing. And I said to my wife, that's enough for literature. I gave literature 10 years of my life. It didn't give me back anything but troubles. And I said, this guy, I'm a dentist, and this guy, if he would like, he mistreated me, he insulted me almost. If he wanted to meet me as a dentist, he should have an appointment. So what happened is that I cannot take this anymore, and applied for immigration to New Zealand. Why New Zealand? By the way, I know the rules of immigration to New Zealand by heart. I can give a seminar about that because I studied very well how to get your license as a dentist. And why New Zealand? Because I was so frustrated, and I decided to go as far as I could. You see, probably, I don't know. And then I told my wife, I have one more novel to write. I'm working on this novel. And of course, I won't be able to publish. So after this novel, that's enough with literature, no more writing. And that novel was Yacoubian Building. And I was in London. Of course, it was a huge success. And we were celebrating 1 million copies with one of my English publishers, because in the UK I have 3 publishers. So we were celebrating 1 million sold copies of the Yacoubian Building. And there was a dinner. I was talking to a lady beside me, and I told her, where are you from? And she said, from New Zealand. And I felt really moved. So I told them this story. And so it wasn't easy for writing. But with the CC, it became a nightmare. Why? Because ironically, Mr. Stacey knows me in person, and we met twice in person. So he knows, I think, he knows what kind of person I am. And as soon as he arrived to power, I was banned from everything. I was banned from writing, in the newspapers, banned from any TV appearance, banned from my weekly culture seminar I used to organize for 20 years. A terrible character assassination in the media, accusing me of terrible things. And then I began to accept the invitations to teach creative writing in the US. So I used to teach and go back to Egypt. With this novel, I know it. I know it because I finished the first chapter. You're talking about this general, and I work I write very early in the morning, and then my wife told me, how was writing? And I said, it's good. I finished the first chapter, but I think that we will leave the country because I know it, that it will never be possible for them to accept this novel. Of course, it was published in Lebanon, and then it was published, and then I was brought to a military court because this novel, and I cannot remember any novelist, at least in Egypt or in the Arab world, who was brought to a military court because of a novel. You see, so I live now in the US. I teach creative writing, and I have my creative writing workshop in Brooklyn, New York, and that's it.
I wrote this book a few years ago, and one of the scenes in the book is very much based on the massacre in Sabra and Shatia 40 years ago. And in this part of the world, very few people are familiar with Sabra and Shatia and what happened. And so when people would read that part of my book in North America, they would always complain that it was too violent, too graphic. And then one day I was talking to an Egyptian book club who obviously understood the reference. And their complaint was that it wasn't violent enough. If I was basing it on Sabra and Shatia, why did I tone it down so much? And I'm wondering if you've had a sort of similar experience with how your work, particularly this novel, if it has made its way somehow into Egypt, or if you've had feedback from Egyptians, how that's differed from maybe feedback in this part of the world. How are readers responding in different ways to the work?
Well, the dictatorship, the generals who are ruling Egypt, they are far behind. I mean, they live mentally in the 40s and 50s, and they believe they can really ban a novel, right? It's no more. You cannot ban a novel anymore. So what happened in this novel has been read widely in Egypt and in the Arab world. Accordingly, I've had very strong, very good feedback. The idea is, well, people, and this is interesting, there are people who like me as a novelist, right? But they don't like the revolution for many reasons, they have been influenced by the media. They have their interests. They are very rich, no matter what. We have a neighbor who is like this. She's a wonderful person, but she doesn't like the revolution. But she likes me as a writer, right? And she refused to read the novel for about 4 months. And she told me, honestly, I don't want, because I know I want to keep my image of the revolution, and you're going to change that. I said, no. And then she read and she said, what happened is that what I expected, I cried with those scenes. And here you discover a great aspect of literature. A literature, you're talking about your novel, in the way you could influence your readers about a terrible massacre like Sabra or Shatila through fiction is much more powerful than 100 articles, you know, or 100. If you make speech, if you do anything, if fiction is talking to the heart, you see. So I believe that this is one great aspect of fiction.
Absolutely. I remember the last time I was in Egypt, I was watching this surreal press conference on TV, and it was this general with the military. I don't know if he was an honorary general or what this guy was doing, but it was a press conference to announce that the Egyptian military in all its glory had discovered a device that cures all illnesses. And I remember sitting watching this press conference and watching people clap and thinking, this is, when I went back and told friends about this, half of them didn't believe me. And I'm wondering if you ever find yourself in these situations where you're trying to describe the absurdity of a regime or the absurdity of a fascist or quasi-fascist system, and you find that fiction isn't fictional enough to allow you to sort of do this properly. I'm wondering if you ever run up against a similar problem when you're looking at something so absurd.
Yeah, absolutely. What is happening in Egypt, at one generally what's happening in a dictatorship is surreal. Is something that probably when you write it, people will accuse you. People say you exaggerate, but what you say happened, And this guy is an honorary, really, and what is really, it's not funny. It's funny and sad at the same time. He never studied medicine, right? And he never went to the university. And he was a technician in of physiology and the University of Alexandria. And you see how when he said this, and it's totally nonsense, has nothing to do with scientific research. By that time, I was allowed, to express my opinion. So I said on Twitter that I have a master's degree of dentistry histology from the University of Illinois, Chicago. And to register, you must study scientific research and scientific thinking, just to register in the program. So I said that this has nothing to do with scientific research or scientific thinking. You cannot evaluate yourself. I cannot say, I discovered a medication for whatever. There are steps to be done, and you must go through, stages. And I was not the only one who said that. There was 3 or 4 people, 2 of them professors of medicine, and one of them was a doctor too. And there was a terrible attack against us in the media, accusing us of being traitors, of being agents of the big companies like Pfizer, and then they paid us so that we try to make the point that this invention, and and then of course they realized later that was nothing. Nobody was held to account. Nobody apologized. Nobody said we were wrong, because the message of the dictatorship, anything I will tell you is the truth. You see, I don't care about the truth. The dictator says, I don't care about the truth. I will present my own truth. You see, so that was an example. Yes.
Now, you were instrumental in the Kafaya, the Enough movement. You were, I believe, there for all 18 days in Tahrir. I think for a lot of Egyptians, the watching you grill a government minister was one of the first times that anyone had seen that kind of dynamic play out. I'm sure you get asked this question all of the time. But I also don't know when I'll get to speak to you again, so I have to ask you.
No, no.
Why do you think it failed? Why do you think this thing that a lot of Egyptians, myself included, had so much faith in and seemed to be such a powerful movement, 10 years later, we have a military dictator in civilian clothes who's arguably worse than the last guy? What do you think is the reason or the reasons that transformation happened?
Well, we disagree, my dear friend. I don't think the revolution has failed. And it's not really a romantic thing. I mean, if you read, and I'm quite sure you did, when we read the history of the revolutions, the revolution is not a reform, and it is not a coup d'etat. It is a very profound change, and this change is irreversible. It could not happen, but if it happens, it's irreversible. I tell you, despite the terrible dictatorship we have now, Egyptians who are living now are no more the Egyptians they used to be before the revolution, even if they don't realize. You can follow how Egyptians, for example, think about the religion, about the government, about think. They are not allowed to express their thoughts because it's a terrible dictatorship. But you know how what the real headache for the Egyptian regime now is the social media, because people are able to express freely, to some extent, their thoughts. So what happened in all revolutions happened in our country. You see, uh, let's get back to the French Revolution. After 10 years, how was the situation in France? In France, catastrophic. Everybody was killing everybody, you know. And not only that, one of the sons of the revolution became an emperor, and then after that, the old regime got back to power, the old royal family. When I tell you the Russian Revolution, you will tell me, everybody will do that. When did it happen? People will say 1917. No, 1917, the Russian Revolution succeeded, took over. But the Russian Revolution began 1825 with a movement called the Decembrists. Those Decembrists, they were rebels, and they were a mixture of military people and intellectuals, and they were strongly influenced by the French Revolution. And then there was a kind of uprising against the Tsar for the first time. And then between 1825 till 1917, there were many waves of the Russian Revolution. And of course, the Tsar cracked down on everybody until finally 1917 they took over. The revolution is irreversible, and the revolution is the change of mind, basically, which will lead to a political change. The counter-revolution, what we see now, has everything. What are the weapons of the counter-revolution? Everything. The army, the police, the media, the money, the businessmen, the international relations, everything. What are the weapons of the revolution? Moral weapons. It's like courage, conscience, willing to sacrifice. But no one single revolution in history was really defeated, was terminated. We just need time, and the future is on our side.
I remember when I was very young, I was having a conversation with my father. My father, born and raised in Egypt, he marinated in the place. grew up in El Hussein and loved this country. But we were talking about he had to get out eventually. He had to get out of the country. He had to leave for economic and political reasons. And at one point we were talking about the sort of the he was telling me about what he sees as the difference between one of the central differences between the West. And he was talking about America in particular, but I think he meant the West and back home. And he talked about this idea of, if you have someone who rises to prominence, they become a CEO, they become a surgeon, they become president, and maybe they come from a poorer background. Maybe their parents are working class. And he kept saying, in the West, that's something to be celebrated. In the West, they'll say, look, all the, how far this person came. Whereas back home in Egypt, they'll always hold it against this person. They'll always say, yeah, but he came from, look where he came from. And this kind of idea that you carry past generations with you in a different way in Egypt. And I think that's one of the things that I really, really love about a lot of your characters is the struggle that they have with who they are, where they're from, what they carry with them. You talked earlier about being a dentist. I believe that was on the advice of your father, who was a writer.
Yes.
And told you had talent, writing talent, but told you find something else to do as well. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about the advice he gave you once he realized that you had this talent and that you could make something of yourself as a writer.
I was, thank you. I was an only kid, so I was very much attached to my father. And by that time, he took me with him everywhere. And accordingly, I was a very little friend for names that I realized later that they are the biggest names in art and culture in Egypt. And he told me, you must have, because he was a famous writer in Egypt and he was a lawyer. At some point, he was punished as a writer because he was he was supporting the student movement in 1971. So he got banned from writing totally. Yeah. And then he gave me this example. He said, you know what? I'm supporting my family simply because I'm a lawyer and they cannot arrest my clients, right? And my clients paid me. That's why I'm fine. If I was just a writer, I would have been in trouble. Ironically, how many years? 40 years later, I realized that he was right. And what happened to him happened to me. Because when I was banned from writing, they cannot, I remember, the sentence of my father is that they no way they can arrest my clients. Accordingly, I was living and supporting my family because I was a dentist, and that was his advice, and I took his advice, and it was a very good advice, because one more reason, you cannot make your living from fiction writing in the Arab world. Even Naguib Mahfouz, as you know, who had the Nobel Award, he was obliged to work as a public servant till the age of retirement. I can claim modestly that I'm an exception, because I have been a bestseller in the West, and this brings money. But usually you have to have another profession.
That's the very first story that I remember hearing about anything to do with literature was my father telling me about Naguib Mahfouz, because he used to come to Ahwat al-Fishawi and Hussein, and my father was a little kid and he would sneak in and sort of listen to them hold court to all of these luminaries, and until things got too raunchy, and then Hag al-Fishawi would kick the kids out of the place. There seems to be this very sort of the Egyptian canon of the luminaries and the cultural luminaries, of which the likes of Naguib Mahfouz. Every time Arabs hear my last name and they hear that I'm a writer, I'm asked if I'm related to Abbas Al Akkad. And of course, I say yes, even though that's not true. I lie and tell them that I am. I am curious, having had this level of success, do you think of what your place is in that canon? Or more so, do you think about what you want it to be, how you want to be remembered as an Egyptian writer?
Well, it's very, I had, honestly, I had a problem after the big success I had with the Yacoubian Building. I stopped writing for about a couple of years. Why? Because on one aspect of this problem is that I was scared to lose this success. And the other aspect is I refused to reproduce the formula. You're a novelist and writer and successful writer, and you will understand what I want to say. There is a formula, and you know it better than anybody else, right? And the worst thing you can do is to reproduce the formula to get the same success. Then you will be betraying art. And if you betray art, you will lose everything. So I had simply to forget this success totally. And the best way to forget the success is to get adapted to the idea of failure. Is like, I will write a novel that will fail, and I'm fine with this. But I want to write it, and I'm quite sure it will never be a bestseller. The critics will attack the novel. People will never be interested. Everybody will tell me the first novel. It wasn't my first novel; it was my fourth. But anyway, the first book was much better, and I made a kind of psychological exercise so that I will live with this. And that was the only way to me to be able to write Chicago, my other novel. And of course, we say Alhamdulillah, thanks God, it was a very big success. But success in art could be as dangerous as failure.
We are being interrupted because we have run too long, I think.
You have not run too long. You have not run too long. And in fact, it's hard to come back up on the screen because it's really wonderful to listen to the two of you. And I just love this sentence of yours just now, Alaa, that we must adapt to the idea of our own failure. I think it's such it can be taken into any aspect of our lives, and it's such profound advice that can fortify us against any inclination that would make us just conformist. So there are lots of nuggets in your conversation together that I will be keeping. But I do want to just make good on our promise that we would leave a little time for questions from the audience. And there are two so far in the queue, the first one of which I'm going to need your help with, Omar, because it's in Arabic and I'm helpless. So can you click on that button and see it yourself, Omar, so that you could read it out? Or translate it.
It has suddenly disappeared from my screen. I vaguely remember it being something like, "Is there something from the book?" But I don't see it on my screen right now. I apologize.
You're not seeing the ask a question tab at all?
I'm only seeing two.
Maybe if you scroll, does that help? No.
Apologize.
Well, we can.
I definitely saw it earlier. I apologize.
So whoever put that Arabic question in the queue, if you want to put it in the chat again, we'll see it there, or translate it for us and put it anywhere you like. We'll look for it. But while we wait for that, I'll just move on to the next one, which is asking Alaa whether you have by any chance read Omar's novels, and if so, which of the characters spoke to you, and has a second question. Saying Egypt has been blessed with amazing women writers, and Susan Sachs mentions in particular Nawal al-Sadawi and Alifa Rifat. And can either or both of you say whether any of these women influenced you or had an impact on Egypt, in your view? So quite a few strands in this one question.
Okay, so well, unfortunately, I apologized. I haven't read his novels yet, but I I I saw his interviews. I saw him on YouTube talking about his novels, and I read articles of his, and I did like his writing. I did like, as a matter of fact, the way he's presenting his ideas, because to me, I can claim I have experience, in culture. Accordingly, I can tell. I can tell. I think I can tell. So, of course, I will definitely read his novels, and I'm very proud of him because he had all this success, and of course, I'm proud of him.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
Nawal al-Sadawi, Alifa Rifat, they are great writers. Of course, Nawal al-Sadawi is helped in the formation of the conscience of the Egyptian society as far as the woman rights may be concerned. And I know her personally, and she was a real fighter, and she kept producing different reactions till the end, even after her death. But I believe she is a great writer and a great humanist. She believes in humanity much more than anything else. Alifa Rifat is different, because Alifa Rifat is really talented. I would say Nawal al-Sadawi is an activist, a great activist, who, this is my opinion, which is not necessarily the truth, right? But that's how I think. Who used fiction, to support her cause. Alifa Rifat is a pure artist, you see. And she had, of course, in our society, especially in any dictatorship, but in dictatorship in the Arab world, you have everybody is oppressed, but there are people who are oppressed twice. Once like everybody else, and one extra time, one extra oppression, because they are women, because they are Christians, because they, so this is the dynamics of the dictatorship. Alifa Rifat was a great artist of fiction, and she was very progressive. I cannot say too progressive. I will never say that, because it doesn't exist, the term too progressive, right? But she was very progressive, and she made problems all the time with her novels and short stories, because she was a free woman writing about her feelings, about her body, about her affairs, about it. And this is something that in the Arab world could cause a whole bunch of troubles for the right.
So I think in some ways, in answering this question, you've begun to answer another question that's in the queue from Lauren Davis. Which Arab writers would you recommend we in the West read? So who else might you add to that list? And of course, as a bookseller, I'm interested in that also.
No, we have the network of translation. This is a big issue we can make, is not always following the art. That's something which is very sad. How is that the topic, there are, in the translation, there are people in charge. There are people who have the power to decide who will be translated, right? And those people, many of them, do care about the topic much more than the art. So if you write about a good topic, but the novel is terrible, right? As far as the art may be concerned, you will be translated. Accordingly, you have a very strange thing, that you have Greek names in the Arabic literature who haven't been translated enough. You see, in the West, Tayyib Saleh, for example. Tayyib Saleh. This is Sudanese writer. He's a great writer, one of the great writers. You see, but the problem is the topic versus the art. So if I write a story about which reveals a real cause which is important, but I'm a bad writer, I will be translated, unfortunately. So this is one problem. The second problem is the academic translation. I have been translated to 37 languages by the publishing houses everywhere that publish other writers. I see myself, my real success, in my opinion, is that I am presented now in the world as a successful writer who happened to be Egyptian. I'm not presented in the folkloric scene. The line of the handicapped. You see. So yes, we Egyptians, we write novels. No, I am presented like any other writer who is English or Swedish, but I am Egyptian. I think this is a real success. So the translation network is not fair and is not functioning. I'm not accusing anybody, but I'm telling you what I have experience with this. It's not fair and is not art oriented necessarily, and it's not functioning very well.
So, there are more questions in the queue. There's appreciation in the queue. Some of the questions are so large that we just don't have time for them, to going into details of your opinions about the revolution. But I do want to just thank you again also for the sentiment in this conversation. I think you said that the future is on our side. It's not a sentence that that we are told much, and especially not from someone with authority and conviction and heart the way that you said it. And it's hard to be patient when the world is on fire, but at the same time it's the only thing, because as you so beautifully described, the profound change is maybe invisible, but it's germinating until it suddenly becomes visible. So your book describes an instance of that, and I want to encourage all of you to go and find your way into the pages of that book, also Omar's book, and books, that is, all of these books. Do remember that you can hear him talk about his latest novel by joining the event at the Princeton Public Library. Alaa has said that he might be teaching again in Princeton before too long. Alaa, I hope that's true, and when you do, I hope to see you in the store.
Yeah, we'll
and to
come
meet.
to see you, definitely.
Good to meet you in person, because this has been very rich, and I think I speak for the audience in saying that we're grateful for your thoughts, Omar, for your careful questions, and with that, I thank you. I thank all of you who joined us. You can join other events. Just look them up at labyrinthbooks.com at the events page. And one practical thing, some folks had trouble getting their discount by entering Aswany at checkout. I just want to end with a quick promise. I'm going to make sure that anyone who has ordered the book tonight gets their 10% off on that order. So thank you.
Thank you very much, because you made it happen. Thank you. Thanks for the audience, and thank you for my dear friend now, Omar, because you've moderated the event in a wonderful way. Very interesting questions and very intelligent questions, and you enabled me to express how I feel, not only what I think, but also how I feel. So thank you very much.
So Alaa, now you go read Omar's books, and then we turn the
Absolutely.
tables, and you come back, and we talk about it.
It's my homework for this week.
Okay, so we have a future date.
شكرا يا دكتور. شكرا.
Okay, well, goodbye, everybody, and thank you. Take good care. Bye.